Welcome back to Citizens Forum, segment 2. In this segment, we're going to be talking to Christina Nikolic. Christina is an organic horticulturalist and owner of the Organic Gardener's Pantry. So you can guess what we're going to be talking about. And we're going to start off with just a little bit about plant pests and diseases, etc.
Yeah, hi Jack, thanks for having me up again. I had the pleasure twice already to come here and talk to everybody about how gardens and how nature really work. And so we learned about fascinating concepts such as plants being fed by the action of microbes rather than us going out with a bag and putting fertilizer on the ground. It's much more cooperative in nature where plants and bacteria and fungi work together, and that's how plants really eat. They eat broken down organic matter. So we want to support these microorganisms. And then last time I was here, we talked about pests and diseases, which in conventional horticulture, they're usually being killed off using some sort of poison. But in organic horticulture, we're awakening to the fact that they have a role to play, that they are messengers and symptoms of an underlying cause. So if we can help our plants be really healthy, really well fed, lots of organic matter, enough water, they're partners in the soil and above ground, they are less likely to get sick. And then we have less need, in quote unquote, to fight pests and diseases and insects with harmful pesticides. And that, for me, that was a real eye-opener, is to learn how to work with nature rather than try to dominate and conquer all the time, because in the long run we have nothing on nature. She's got the much longer track record.
Maybe that's the most important message almost of all time. You know, we have to work with nature, not against her. Do you want to say any more on those subjects, or?
Yeah, because what we hadn't touched on yet was weeds, and how there's, in my mind at least, and everybody else I speak to will hopefully go through the same paradigm shift. I had a big eye-opener when I learned about the ecological role of weeds. They are not there to be a nuisance. And weeds, just like insects and what we call pests and diseases, are people too. They have a role to play in the big picture. Their aim is to eat, drink, be merry, procreate, and make the next generation. So I've come to understand weeds as plants, like any other plant. In nature, there's no good and bad. It's all different roles to play. And weeds are simply better adapted to the conditions in our gardens than what we originally intended to grow. So just like pests and diseases and insects, weeds are showing us what's going on in the soil rather than taking up space and taking nutrients away from from what we want to grow, what kind of crops we want to grow. And that's a really much more benign way of looking at it and a more humble way to look at it. And we have so much to learn from the plain dandelion. It's a fascinating plant.
For example?
Dandelions thrive in conditions with a lot of compaction, perhaps a bit of heavy soil, low oxygen content, low organic matter content, maybe even low calcium content, but high magnesium content. And not only do they thrive in these conditions, their function in the long run is to remove and reverse these conditions. Have you ever pulled a dandelion? Or tried to?
And remember more than I care to remember. And I always felt guilty doing it.
So did I. And the reason they have this big, long, strong taproot is they help opening up that heavy, compacted soil. That taproot, when it eventually dies, leaves a channel that provides that vital aeration and water transportation channel and organic matter transportation channel into the subsoil. And also, we know something else that is really fascinating about dandelions, which is, even though they thrive in low calcium soils, when they're done and died off, their bodies contain calcium for some obscure reason, whether they bring it up from below or they make it in some way. There's different theories on that. But the fact is, over the long run, the dandelion with its taproot and its body is going to improve the soil, raise calcium, break up compaction, add organic matter, all these things. So when I learned that, I looked at my garden full of dandelions and started pulling them and then just leaving the dandelions in the beds where I pulled them. It's a little different on lawns, and in the last couple of minutes on the show we can talk about organic lawns. But I did this faithful dandelion ripping out, flipping over, and leaving it on the ground as mulch for about 2 years. And I hardly have any dandelions in my yard anymore. And so what I'm thinking is, because I haven't sprayed anything, I haven't removed anything really, I leave most everything in my garden, that it fixed the underlying cause of its own existence. It kind of worked itself out of its own job. Nature put it there because it was the right plant at the right time in that right space when it had done its job, and I was helping it by leaving the plant bodies on the surface. It changed the environment just such that it's no longer compacted and it's better balanced in nutrients, and now the dandelion has no longer a role to play.
So you wanted to talk about the now what?
Yeah.
And talk about a checklist on organic gardening practices.
For sure. And it's really, really rather easy. The good news is organic gardening takes way less work, so more hammock time. It's nice. I rather enjoy my garden from the hammock than bending over double in the bed and moving weeds. And it's basically all boiled down to feeding the soil, feeding the soil, making sure that everybody has to eat and to drink, and creating habitat for as many different critters as we possibly can. And I'm never anymore afraid of having pest organisms in my garden, because the key to that is biodiversity. For every critter there's another 10 critters that want to eat it. So the more different critters I have, from the microbiological level all the way up to birds and insects, the less any one of them is likely to spike in populations and become a problem. And it totally works. Like, my garden is by far not a big show garden like Bouchard's, but there is very few things that look like moth-eaten, diseased, stressed out, and so forth. And I grow really, really beautiful fruit and grapes and apples and berries and such.
So the lesson is that organic gardening works, and also, as you say, takes less time.
Yeah, do less.
And is much, much better for not only what we get out of it, which is unsprayed and untainted, but is certainly the way to go.
Yeah, it is totally the way to go, and it's as easy as starting to mulch. If you're looking for one easiest, most timely practices that you can change in your garden, is look around in the garden, see if there's any bare soil, any like uncovered soil at all, and start dumping leaves on it. Right now that's really easy. We get a gluttony of leaves in just a moment, and whether it's oak or beech or birch or alder or whatever you have, it's all good, because to nature it's all food. It's all going to break down, provide carbs and nitrogen for the plants by way of the organic, of the microorganisms in the soil.
So the whole garden should be covered?
Pretty much.
Okay.
And I overheard the thing about leaf blowers with the earlier guest. And leaves, by all means, they should be raked off sidewalks, patios, stairs, and lawns, because lawns and leaves don't mix very well. But if they are then sitting there, removed, they should be raked or blown into the beds. Not blown. But put them into the beds, under the shrubs, over the perennials, leave them there. Okay. That is really, what could be easier than that? You don't even have to bag them and put them out to the city for pickup. I am one of these people who drive around in the neighborhood with their car or bike trailer and pick up bags of leaves from other people's curbs, because I dump them all in my garden. They're so wonderful.
Now, you wanted to spend 3 or 4 minutes talking about organic lawn care, and that's where we are, 3 or 4 minutes.
But let me just give some more pointers on other things to do, if I may.
You may do whatever you want.
I'll keep an eye on the time. So mulching with leaves, with compost, all sorts of organic matter, wood chips perhaps, stay away from bark because it doesn't feed the soil as well. And then keep that up, and then water above the ground so that the mulch is wet, so that the microbes can break it down. Then what I said about the dandelions, the technique that I used is rip and flip. I rip them out of the ground, I flip them over, I leave the weeds on top of my mulch. They will die. If you're really worried, you can take the seed heads and put them in the compost, but I really didn't even bother doing that anymore. And they will contribute to that biological and nutritional balance in the soil. And then the other really, really smart way to garden easy and fast is what I call chop and drop, which means when you deadhead your perennials and cutting them down for the winter, you use your shears and you cut it all to pieces and you leave it right where they drop, in the beds, providing mulch and completing that cycle of life, because the nutrients that break down will become part of the soil and will be taken up by the plant the next year.
Doesn't everybody do that?
Most people don't yet, because
Really?
they like a tidy yard.
Oh.
And the one thing
Nature isn't tidy.
nature isn't tidy.
It's perfect.
Nature is perfect, all right. Not always what we want to see, but it's time for us to look at nature differently and recognize that innate wisdom. Like if you go to the forest, nobody leaf blows in the forest, right? And all those needles and branches that fall become part of the litter layer. And so we don't want to remove that litter, even though it's very counterintuitive, but it's changing. And then if you also plant plants in communities, ground covers, perennials, shrubs and trees over top, you're supporting more of that same stable system. There's a reason that a lot of indigenous folks planted 3 or 4 crops together in the same field when they had agriculture, because they support each other. 2 species are more than 1, 10 are more than 2, and so forth. Better than that. And so in the end, that and stop the digging, stop the cleanup, prune as little as you can.
Stop the digging, what does that mean?
Oh, there's lots of evidence that whenever we dig the soil, we start disrupting that soil food web in the ground. The bacteria on the bottom don't want to be at the top. The fungi at the top don't want to go downtown in the underground where there's less oxygen. So the less tillage, the better. And if you have compacted soil, you will find that over time with mulching, they will become less and less compacted.
So even compacted soils you don't really want to dig? Maybe once?
Maybe once,
Yeah.
to incorporate lots of organic matter. But after that, if you then keep it up, you should have a lot better tillage. You should be able to stick your hand in without having to dig.
Just by mulching and doing everything else.
Yeah,
Now I know you
that
wanted
goes
to
for
talk
beds.
about organic lawn care.
Yes,
so-
yes, the lawns, because we still have lawns, and some purists say we shouldn't have lawns at all. But I think lawns are really important because they're good oxygen producers. You can do yoga on them. You can hang out with a lawn chair. So, but if there is lawns, there's a bunch of steps you can do that will keep it healthy on its own and rather weed free. Because if you look at grasses, ecologically speaking, they're really competitive, and grasses can outcompete most any other plant and just invade their space and grow there when it's healthy, when it has what it needs. So our job as gardeners is not to fight whoever is growing in the lawn that we don't want there, but to make the grass as happy as it can, so it can outcompete the weeds. And that's a bunch of easy steps. You want to mow as high as you can get away with. High meaning about 3 inches, because the longer the grass is, the better energy producing capacities it has, and the better the root zone is below. It's really helpful too to have really sharp mower equipment, because if you have a dull blade, it injures the grass a lot, and a lot of stuff evaporates and it gets stressed out. Don't want that. We also want to leave the clippings. And more people are doing that because they realize the time saving of not having to rake the clippings. If you mow frequently enough, you only take a bit of the blade off every single time, and there's not a big, glut of clippings on the lawn that you even have to rake. So let them fall right in between the blades. And contrary to conventional belief, that they don't actually make thatch. They do decompose. They won't make this real brown layer at the top at the bottom of the lawn. So they're fine. Leave the clippings, mow high, sharp mower equipment. Quit the harmful practices such as dethatching and power raking. Dethatching.
I've never heard of that.
Well, as soon as you enter the turf industry, you hear it a lot. There's a grass plant has a limited lifespan of a year or 2, and then it dies, and some more comes up from side by side. And that body of grass will not decompose as easily because there's very ligneous, woody parts to a grass plant that resist decomposition. And so if there's not enough biodiversity in the soil, and if the grass is also stressed out and not moist enough to support fungi and stuff, then that will build up over time until you have this thick layer of brown, dead, straw-like stuff under your lawn, and the roots have to go all through that to get to the soil, and it's generally regarded as a bad idea, and then you can rent these handy little tools that rake it all out. But what happens is it's a really injurious practice, because that power tool that rakes it out like a big comb doesn't distinguish between dead plant parts and living plant parts. So it rips a lot of living branches, if you will, off the existing grass plants, and then you get more damage and more thatch, and so the problem becomes the problem.
Yeah.
Instead, there should be, in an organic lawn, there will be fungi that are specialists in eating lignans. They will break that stuff down. So the solution to that is not to remove it manually, but to make the grass really happy and to supply water and to make sure that there's a top dressing with compost and to make sure that the compost has fungal components in it, which then can eat the thatch. Organic lawn care requires a bit more thinking, but then it requires a lot less work.
And nobody knows any of, I had a lawn for many, many years. I don't now, but
Yeah.
I never heard of any of this stuff. I have no idea what to do. I just did my best, it was
Oh,
pathetic.
sure, yeah, and that's just fine. I would
But
say.
I know you're part of a group that gives classes.
Yes, yeah, because once you go through a course at Gaia College, gaiacollege.ca, we teach all of this, like everything I've been talking about in a nutshell will be taught in much larger detail through organic garden or through the Organic Master Gardener course, including 2 sessions on soils and 1 session on lawns and
Do kids get this in school?
I don't know. I don't think they're taught. I'm sure they will get it if you approach it
Yeah.
from the right angle.
That's what I mean. Is this
Yeah.
taught in schools? Because
I
it seems
don't-
so important.
I don't think so. But I should talk to some teachers and see if I can get in there.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, they should be running after you and others in the field, teaching everybody organic
We have,
gardening and lawn care because it's so
Yeah.
important.
but we got more and more professionals who take these courses through Gaia College, who become members of SOUL, Society for Organic Urban Land Care. And the word is being spread, especially since we're finding that pesticides and fertilizers are causing a lot of damage in the long run.
I'm shocked. to hear
Yeah,
that.
and appalled.
We've got less than 2 minutes left. Are there any other things you wanted to go over before we are finished?
Say on the lawn thing, I think we covered that with the mowing and the watering and the not
really talk
using
about
so many
watering.
power
Maybe-
tools. Water?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you go without watering your lawn?
You could. There's several stages of dormancy that it will enter if it has no water at all. I'd recommend to maybe water the lawns during drought conditions, which is in Victoria, which is June, July, August, roughish, maybe September, to water the lawn at the rate of about 1 inch per week. And it might go brown partially, but the roots and the crowns will stay alive, and so it will bounce right back in the fall.
Yeah. I never watered my lawn and it always sort of came back.
There's different voices. Some say that water shouldn't be squandered on lawns. The organic practitioners recognize water as a necessary element in the web of life in the soil. So without water, you don't have healthy plants and you don't have healthy microbes, and you will have compacted soils, and you will run into lots of problems that stem from weeds moving in because they are more adapted to these conditions.
Christina Nikolic, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And thanks for watching this segment on organic horticulture on Citizens Forum.